Welcome to Season 8 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. This is where we chat with experts in the field, patients who use these devices, physical therapists, and the vendors who make it all happen. Our goal? To share stories, tips, and insights that ultimately help our patients get the best possible outcomes. Tune in and join the conversation. We are thrilled you are here and hope it is the highlight of your day.
Hi everyone, my name is Joris, and this is another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright. How you doing, Brent?
Hey Joris, I'm doing well, man. I know you're a big fan of this seasons thing, right? You know, a dozen episodes per season and all that stuff. Well, we're one episode away from closing out our eighth season, which means that we will have 96 episodes in the book. What do you think about that?
That's a lot, dude. That's amazing. That's really amazing.
So if you want, you can binge on Joris and Brent and the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. That could make somebody go crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you could binge on it for like a really long time. Oh, that's crazy. I hope no one does this. Okay. So today we don't have a guest, right? But we do have like a sponsor, right? So who's sponsoring this episode today?
Yeah. So Advanced 3D is actually sponsored this whole season. And it is a contract manufacturer. I'm a part of that along with Paul and Tyler. And we essentially want to encourage everybody to look at additive manufacturing as a reasonable manufacturing technique to create prosthetic and orthotic devices. And we can meet you anywhere you want. If you've never scanned before, to if you've scanned, if you want to help with check sockets, definitive sockets, workflows, we can do it all. But, so that's Advanced 3D. But, we had Mike Astilla on from LimGuard, and he said, you know what, Brent, I had so much fun on the show, and I think you guys are doing a good job. And so he wanted to sponsor these last few episodes of season 8. And so I thought that was really cool and super insightful with LimGuard, which is the removable rigid dressings for people that have just had an amputation. So it's like a helmet for somebody's leg after surgery.
That's a super cool, man. That's super nice. And where would you get it? Who would buy that and how would they buy it? I mean, is it something that the surgeon would get, the prosthesis would fit? How does this work? If I'm interested in this, how would that happen?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things that I thought, especially Mike, and then we've had some other guests, which I'll foreshadow for the following next week, is about the removable rigid dressings and really the opportunity it is to get yourself in front of a patient and also be part of the patient care. So it's best if a prosthetist has a relationship with a surgeon does the amputation, and it's just part of the care. Every person that has an amputation gets a helmet for their suture line, essentially. And it's crazy, the numbers of people that actually fall, because a lot of people still think they have their leg. And so they'll get up in the middle of the night and they'll fall, injure their leg, and this is a way to protect it.
Okay, that's super cool, dude. That sounds like a really, really worthwhile thing and a really interesting thing to get involved with if you don't yet have that kind of a solution. So thanks. I didn't even know that. So that's good. Good news. So in lieu of having a guest, we're going to talk about some news and some goings on that we found very interesting in the market and the wider world. And we're just going to start with some really exciting news, right, Brent?
Yeah. So and shout out to Linda Calabria, who we've had on the show, and she just does an amazing job. And what is funny is she's like graphics that nobody asked for, but I think that are interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And she just has this graphic, and if you take a look at it, it's on LinkedIn within the last week or so. But it just shows kind of the snowball effect of upper extremity companies that have been acquired. So like in the late 90s, Fillauer acquired Motion Control. Then and then there was a big period of time, and then 2015, College Park acquired Liberating Technologies. And then 2016, Ossur acquired Touch Bionics. 2017, Autobach acquired B Bionic. It's like, holy moly, is there that much demand for upper extremity? And then 2019, two things happened. Fillauer acquired TRS, which is pretty wild. And then Ossur acquired part of College Park Industries, which was kind of interesting as well. And then it snowballed. So Coapt acquired then Liberating Technologies from College Park. So that lasted 2 years, which is kind of wild. And then Ossur acquired Naked Prosthetics, which was for partial hands. Then 2023, out of nowhere, this company called Eqwal acquired Steeper. And then this is the news that though I wanted to get to is that in 2024, Hanger acquired Fillauer, which does a lot of stuff in the upper extremity realm, and they distributed the Taska hand or Taska prosthetics. But then just this past week, I think, Eqwal acquired Taska. So it's almost like they kind of pulled, I don't know if it's pulling the rug out from under. I would love to be back in these smoke-filled rooms, of these acquisitions and what really happens. Mm-hmm. But it appears that Eqwal was very nimble and acquired Taska, which I don't know what that relationship now will be with Fillauer because Hanger and Eqwal are competing companies. So very wild. And I'm kind of curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think, so first of all, I'm like, why upper extremity? So is it just because it was more accessible to innovations? It was more accessible to kind of this robotics, new kind of, kind of like these new techniques, finding actual products. Is that the reason why there was so many companies that got acquired, or what do you think?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer. Okay. I think the reality is the robotic side is very interesting. So, and has a global use even outside of the prosthetic and orthotic industry. So, for instance, like these sensors and things of that nature, they can go into something like an exoskeleton, which then goes into the workforce and factory workers and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch more of those people than there are of people that need these devices. So I think it's a little bit of an intellectual property grab. Mm-hmm. And let's get our foundation and some of our fingers in all these places so we have it for the future. So that's kind of my take, because I can't imagine when you're looking at the grand scheme of things, and I don't have the latest number, so you have to forgive me, but out of all amputations, I think there's only like 3 or 5, I think it's 3% of all amputations are upper extremity amputations. And then there's only, and this is a terrible statistic, but I want to say less than 10% of those people mm-hmm. actually wear a prosthesis. Mm-hmm. So you're like fighting for 10% of 3%, mm-hmm. which doesn't seem like a good business move. So I'm curious, kind of like you, why the interest, right? And these companies are going for millions of dollars, and for a hand that costs you, $20,000-$25,000, that's you got to sell a lot of hands to pay back all that money. So I think there's definitely more.
Okay, but then maybe the path from hook, if you will, to robotic hand has been much steeper. There's been much more progress, and people will pay a lot more for them. And you can put a lot more intellectual property in that. Meanwhile, on the lower extremity side, we've got carbon fiber, all sorts of kind of more distributed innovations, right? The kind of, liners, silicone liner stuff, they've been more distributed amongst all the players. But no one's come up with like some super mega robotic foot that really moves the needle for amputees, I think. Whereas the difference between having a hook or having a kind of clamper or having kind of something that is very finger-like is really pronounced. I think, and also maybe also just as if that prosthetic thing, if that look and feel of the thing is really important to you, it's much more difficult to forget about your hands and say throughout the day. If you're, I sit down, so I have a standing desk, so I stand a lot, but I also just sit down for hours. So in that time, maybe my leg could be more, more kind of like forgettable. But my hand, I'm using throughout the day, whatever I'm doing, all throughout the day to do all sorts of stuff. So, maybe it's just like that it's perceived to be more important, more technological innovation that going there. And maybe they're going to sell them for more. Maybe it's just that simple.
Yeah. I mean, it could be. But I think one of the interesting things is it's one of those small companies that now is off the table, right? They've been consumed by a larger company. And so the crazy thing is this vertical integration allows a company like Eqwal, now they own the fabrication of this device, and they have clinics, and they also have a funnel of patients that would be users of this product. So why not? You control the whole thing. And I remember Paul from East Point saying, the more money that you can run through your fingers multiple times, right? So you've got the manufacturing, you've got the patient care side of things, you've got all this stuff that's happening inside your company, the better off you're going to be. And I can't help but think that's what's going to happen. But there's not many more independents left
Yeah,
in this space.
Yeah, and also it's just I think it may also be an investment model. Like, imagine if you make some kind of bionic thumb kind of thing, right? You'll get money for that because you, like you said before, it's like a broader thing. Maybe people, it's not only prosthetics, it's industrial automation. So maybe you get more money than if you're doing a foot kind of related thing, And with that more money, of course, comes responsibility. Comes some guy on board who's got 20% of your company, owns every Friday in your life now, and that guy wants a return, so he wants to flip. Right. Meanwhile, maybe some more of the lower extremity companies, maybe they go the other way. They don't get that funding, so they bootstrap themselves, so they don't have investors, so they don't have to flip, and they just end up becoming maybe less jazzed up and bigger, but still more profitable businesses. Kind of trudging along. Where these businesses kind of have to blow up more and kind of like go big or go home, and then they have to sell.
Yeah.
So I think that's also maybe because of what you said with this broader model. It could be used for automation, it could be used for the military, it could be used for whatever. Maybe then these guys are getting more money, and then the more responsibility comes behind that. So I don't know. I don't really know. I think it's interesting. And what about these companies buying these things? Because we're both kind of worried about it. One of them is Ossur, Auto Bulk.
And now you've got Eqwal, Ossur, Autobach, Eqwal, and then Hanger. Those are kind of your big four players. But before we go down that road, here's one thing. I mean, I know you're on the VC side of things, especially with the additive manufacturing world. How, like these investors, when they inject cash, how quickly do they want it back to go after the newest thing? And here's the reason why I asked this is the interesting thing in this slide that Linda had is you can see that the company called, it was LTI or Liberating Technologies, was part of College Park. And so, but Ossur acquired that technology from College Park in 2019. And then, but what's interesting is that then Ossur was like, I don't know if this really fits with us. And so 2 years later, they spun it out, and then Coapt acquired it. And so this is like the first kind of swap, so to speak, of like, hey, this might not fit us, or hey, this might fit you, and we want to just sell off some of our portfolio to get, another shiny object. How does that work?
Yeah, it depends as well on the type of company, the type of VC, if it's a VC or PE investor or something like that. There's a couple of things at play here. One is that they want outsized returns, right? So they want to return a lot of capital for the investors that give them the money. All right. So they then get that money for, like, let's say a decade, right? Now that could be extended, but that usually is a decade, and they might have a fund for, like, robotic automation Asia, right? or they could have a fund like robots, right? It could be like, so it's limited to that opportunity. It's limited to that 10 years. And they and their investors are expecting like outsized returns. Like, this is much riskier. This is much more involved. There's a lot more downsides. There's a lot more work going into there. So the VC will take a bonus on what the return is, and there'll be a fee baked in there somewhere for them to sustain their business while they're investing this money and getting it back. So they're essentially renting the money from people and trying to get it back more, and a little bit of that has to sustain themselves, and they hope for a large percentage of like the next Facebook. So the math is essentially, it's like they want like above the stock market type returns, wild type returns, 40 times the capital come back on what's at one company. Right? They invest in 10, it's kind of like typical, 8 will go bust, and one will be like kind of sold, but then moi, and then one will be like Facebook. That's kind of the idea, right? Then they get 25, 100, 40 times invested capital back, which they then get 20% of, and then the investor gets the rest, and that's of course great for them. And then so that money is deployed along 10 years, but their investment terms are much lower, less. It depends on which stage they invest in, right? If you're staging in a kind of seed round or kind of friends and family round, well, there's going to be a couple of years in advance. Whereas in a stage C round or something like that, that company's grown already. You're expecting an IPO or an exit event of some kind, like quite close by, So it depends on which stage you invest as well. But we're talking about several years. So 2 to, let's say, maximum 5 years, 7 years. 7 years is wild for like that kind of VC money. It's more like other kind of funds like P&E and stuff. So that's quite quick in the history of a company. So and it depends. If you're an early stage investor, you're going to wait a lot longer for your money, and much later, kind of the last big push round, whatever, you're going to wait a lot shorter for your money. But then it'll be a lot more sure thing. But you're going to have to bring in a lot bigger ticket, right? So the first investor maybe brings in 50,000, maybe 25,000, small amount. But hey, if that becomes like Instagram or whatever, then it's fine, right? But they'll have to wait a lot longer. So that has to do a little bit, but it's also their attitude, right? They don't want you to do okay as a business. That does nothing for them, right? if you're doing all right and growing like 10% a year or something, they're like, that's not interesting. They're like, go, 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 So it's a very different kind of mindset. So that kind of growth mindset, if you will, is very positive because it makes people really get the bang for the buck and really focus on growth and revenue. But it's also bad because it could get people to focus on like cutting corners or not building a business that sustains itself or not really capturing revenue rather than capturing clients for the long term or relationships forever, for example, as you may do if you're more like a family-owned business or whatever. So it depends. But we see that a lot with P&E, private equity investors, that they sell to each other a lot, where they gobble up each other's gains when it makes more or less sense to them. But the VCs as well. But also, it just sometimes just like people change strategy, right? People could just say, "Hey, we want to go into devices in a big way," and then we find out that all these other people are buying device companies, and then all of a sudden that doesn't work for us anymore. The device strategy doesn't work because we can't get a portfolio of 20 devices because we're getting outbid every time by Ossur. So it's more likely, in my point, to be like a strategy change where somebody's like, "Okay, wait, guys, this isn't working," and now all of a sudden we're like a service business that has this one product making little island, and then it seems inefficient. That to me is much more like kind of corporates. Corporates do that a lot. That kind of stuff like, oh, oops, okay, and then we sell them again. Yeah.
So do you think that this, like knowing what after, we've been doing it this a couple of years, I mean, is this a good thing for O&P, with the money coming in? I mean, is it going to push the innovation side of things, or with these small companies being vertically integrated? So that's my first question is, you've got a VC that comes in or some private equity and they want to return in 5 years. They've paid a premium for this, entering into the orthotic and prosthetic space. At year 3 and 4, you're going to start feeling the burn if you are not making gains for them to get their money back. I mean, is that a good thing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, I think personally, P&E money, I'm beginning to see this as kind of poison because they really just fire a whole bunch of people. They just put the debt on the company, and it really is it could be really disruptive in a bad way for O&P if they bought like quite a sizable company in the market. Also, a big competitive company will all of a sudden be a husk of its former self, not care about customers, not care about quality, and they'll get rid of all the people that actually know what they're doing, So P&E money is something that I really, in many cases, I know there's good long-term P&E investors, but in many cases it's horrible. And I don't think it's horrible good for an industry. I don't think it's good for customers. I don't think it's good for staff. I don't think it's good for anybody except for the PE firm. Now, VC money is know what you're getting, know what you're getting yourself into. But I think the good thing is that they could bring innovation and people and growth and a lot of capital. Like we're talking about, they can deploy tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to deploy on things that won't get solved by the industry, the O&P industry working on it by itself. Right? Think about the most cutting edge robotic stuff, the most cutting edge robotics engineers, like things like machine vision, all stuff like that could be really important. That's going to be behind the walls of like companies like Toyota, Honda, whatever, KUKA, whatever, those guys. But a VC company could make it a more democratic kind of ARM-related technology for a ton of people that could be used more broadly. So VC money for this industry I'm more open about, but then it would be more in doing stuff like innovations we couldn't afford to do in OMP itself because they would cost like $200 million, and no one's going to spend $200 million on this market. But if I say that's going to make all the America's super soldiers of the future run faster, then maybe all of a sudden I'll get that $200 million, and that will mean that everybody who's a lower limb amputee, whatever, can walk better. Then that's good. So they can do real innovation that we'd find hard pressed to do with like a team. So imagine you're like the best inventor in the world, and you've got Sarah, who's a robotics engineer, and Karen, who's the best physicist or whatever. You could, with a small team, really do a lot of innovation. And we're seeing that in OMP, and that should continue, and that's wonderful. But there's like this really complex, really kind of team sport type innovations where you're talking you're going to need hundreds of engineers to make it happen and millions of lines of code. Like the type of stuff like the self-driving cars, which, that's a good example. I think the self-driving cars, which has taken a lot of money, a lot of investment, and still doesn't work. But this is important to note. Or it doesn't work completely. So those are the kind of things that kind of investment, high risk capital can really unlock. If somebody could want to, bring spatial awareness or something, or like really advanced, really inexpensive robotics, like soft robotics, but then for lower limb, I don't know, something that we don't even think is possible at the moment, right? The really accurate kind of feet-like movements, but using polymers, using flexible polymers. That kind of stuff could happen with VC. So there's a thing where it's like, but still, that you have to figure out what kind of investor they are and how long they're going to be looking at you as an investment.
Yeah. So I think the other question I had, that's an interesting take, and I hadn't really thought about that. The VC money coming in, you have access to technology that is much greater. And then, it might be just a few lines of that code really makes a difference in a robotic hand or something like that. Or, that team that's part of the KUKA is like, hey, why don't you do this? And it's literally, something that happens within a week, but it's revolutionary. So I see that side of things. But I guess my other question to you is, the prosthetic and orthotic industry, it's a good story, right? So like for VCs or private equity, hey, we're trying to make the world a better place and helping people walk and providing artificial arms and legs. And guess what? We have a foundation that goes to Haiti and to Africa and all that stuff. So that's all stuff to get people on board, and it's a good story. The type of money that we're talking about, is it like in the grand scheme of things? Like I think Hanger got bought, the whole thing, Hanger got bought for $1.3 billion, right? On a 900 and some $1 million valuation. That as part of our portfolio, is that even really a big number? You know what I'm saying? So it's like they get a news cycle for a few weeks out of $1 billion investment. Is it worth it? No, is that the way to look at it, or is it more than that?
No, it's different. The VC guys usually have a fund like $100 or several $100 million if it's the biggest, like California type, Sand Hill Road type investors, right? They can make, and some of the biggest guys do tens of millions of dollars in investment in one thing, and then they do that in 10 companies, $100 million, and then typically, there's very few that can do more than that, But the biggest, like the ones like that, they could theoretically do that, and there was a time, kind of crazy time with like WeWork and stuff like this when people were putting hundreds of millions. as well, when they're kind of like self-fulfilling, trying to make it a self-fulfilling game. Like if I invest, it will work kind of thing, which didn't end up working. But that was like the crazy time. Usually now people are putting in single-digit millions, like $1 billion investment. That's something that would require, it's kind of institutional money, banks lining up a lot of things, and a P&E type of investor kind of lining up a lot of financing. They then load up on the company or somebody with a very, very sophisticated plan, a very long-term plan. That's different kind of money. That's like the kind of money that they would really have to see the growth of that industry happening, right? They would have to see like mega trends happening. They would have to see the underlying business have very good margins, right? They would have to see that business being able to generate cash. They would have to see no kind of natural competition or no natural way to disrupt that business. So either there's patents or there's kind of like you have to be registered to do it, or you have to, have a kind of like territorial kind of exclusivity. They want to see that kind of like that kind of like the business continue to spin off money. So that's a very different kind of like calculation. That's a lot of money to be, even for these guys, it's a lot of money. So that's a different thing. And I think the issue with investing in O&P generally would be that if you look at the market size, it's not great. If you look at everyone could own an iPhone, right? But how many people are going to want a bionic hand specifically? Well, then we're talking about millions of people, not billions of people. And then already and then a lot of these millions of people will actually be poor as well, or in like middle income countries. And then, then you have to, your supersonic bionic hand doesn't work for those people, or you can't make it for them. So, so the economics, of OMP really is generally that it's too small. And an investment of that kind in something like Hanger is like, a bet on continued market dominance. The fact that it is kind of restricted, geographically restricted, you can't just set up shop without having anything. And people will trust a certain brand. And yeah, I think with that economics of scale of fabbing centrally and making things centrally, and that there has to be some kind of solid plan behind that and saying, we're going to now, we buy, 30% of what we sell, we buy from other people. Now we're 10 years from now, it's going to be 5% or something like that. Some kind of internal logic that makes this deal seem like really attractive as a long-term proposition.
So one more question before we get to the big, because that actually brought up another thing, and in the US, like it seems as though there is, less money in this, like more people bootstrapping, right? So people spending their own real money to make some of these things go, especially like in the O&P industry. And I've just learned of this idea of there are some countries that give money almost like VC stuff, but they call it a social enterprise. Have you heard that terminology?
Yeah, it's kind of vague, but yeah.
What's the thought? Like, so my understanding is like, oh, you want to help somebody that is missing an arm or a leg. You know what? We've got a few $1 million over here. The government here. Why don't you give it a shot? And if it all goes away, hey, at least the investor feels good that they tried.
No, but there's a couple of different things. First off, these terms are kind of being used by lots of people for lots of different things. So depending on where you are and what it is. So there's one thing is that people are saying that they are more than just a company, and they're kind of more like a B Corp or a more responsible company, or they have stakeholders as everyone in the world. And they're kind of using cuddly terms. It's a bit amorphous. It's a bit like I want to be a nice guy kind of thing. And that you could kind of read into what you want. Either there's people that want to do more than just make money, or it's just some greenwash marketing kind of BS that they want to do so that people can give them more money, right? Depending on, if you're kind of like, more cynical or not. Generally, what we can see that some people are doing with this term is the allocation of public money and or private money to do ultimately socially beneficial ends, right? That may actually have a return for the investor, right? So we could say that, for example, a government could pay a bonus and say, hey, if we know that women get better outcomes if they complete high school, right? If you start a school here in this Malawi or whatever, some country like this, and we check back 5 years from now, and now we see that the graduation rate in high school for women is super low. It's only 30% or whatever. Well, probably lower. It's only 20%. But if that goes to 50%, then you will get X bonus, right? So then the investor will invest their risk risk capital, if you will, into a plan to get more girls to graduate, right? And then the British government investing in Malawi will then think, oh, wow, that's such an economic benefit from that country and those women and their families that, that we can express that as a dollar amount, and we can give a part of that dollar amount to that investor as a return, right? So that's one element. There's people using the same terminology for that kind of stuff. The other element is people saying that they somehow have a major, their major goal is only to do good, right? And that somehow they're secondary to that is that the fact that they're an enterprise. All these three things are used kind of interchangeably depending on where you are and who they are, right? One is there's a term, and the other one is just an actual kind of program, public and private money being kind of deployed in a kind of in an advantageous way. And the other thing is just more saying, I'm not just an entrepreneur. I save the world too. And then all three are the same kind of thing. Where the middle one I think is the most interesting because if the terminology changes, these guys will call themselves something else. We had that with the 3D printing gurus on LinkedIn. And we had that with those guys. They'll call themselves something else. If now they're all AI gurus, probably, or half of them. But the middle thing is the idea of governments kind of saying, you know what, we'll pay you for effective results rather than we just pay you to keep the school running. And we think that the market or the businesses have a role to play in doing well. Now, this, of course, is a lot of ethical dilemmas, a lot of stuff if the KPI is giving as many people legs, whatever, then maybe I don't care that much if the legs work, right? If I only get paid for how many amputees I help with a leg, then maybe that's not going to be a very good leg, right? That's going to be some wooden chalk thing and go for it, because I get money. So the KPI or whatever the goal is that you get expressed as a target really drives the performance. So if that KPI is well set, the graduation rate among Malawian teenage women, and that's independently verifiable, then we expect that to be very good, right? There's no real way to cheat, but think about, you could go to the schools and get them to lower the exam requirements and let everyone graduate, for example, So there is a really a interplay of incentives here. And also at the same time, there could be a lot of in this, a lot of stuff can go horribly wrong, right? As well with this.
I mean, do you think it's that side of things? So when I hear that and I say that, typically it's somebody that has a very interesting idea that can make changes in the world. They get some funding from a government or what have you. It makes it very difficult for companies that actually do that for a living to compete. You know what I'm saying? So you've got somebody that's getting this free money towards a KPI that may or may not exist, yet they're part of what they're going to use the money for is to enterprise, but their development costs are so much lower because they're getting free money to do this thing and compete directly with the people that are doing that. I mean,
that's
or am I just looking into that?
No, there's a problem all over the world. For example, one of the biggest problems that food aid will flood in a market and then which is great, keeping people alive, wonderful, right? And it sounds like the ultimate unintended consequence. We're going to give these dudes rice and grain and stuff, but often what happens is that it'll flood into certain areas, be sold and all that, and flood the local market as well. So all of a sudden, local guys who do have grain can't sell it, and now they're starving, right? Or they can't buy meat or eggs or whatever, right? So there's always these unintended side effects and always these kind of market economics things, right? If you make mosquito nets and you import them all of a sudden in Kenya, are you going to put all the local Kenyan mosquito net businesses out of business? Is that a bad thing if the mosquito nets sucked, right? Or if it's employing 10,000 people, that's not good, right? But you're curing malaria. So there's always this kind of, you're keeping people from getting malaria. So it's always this trade-off game. And there's no real way to not like to avoid that, in these places where the differences between getting that and not getting that are so stark. So I do think that's a really good kind of that's the thing to worry about. But there are other ways of doing this. Like think about, and we've talked about this before, I think, think about a guy in Guatemala or something like that, who's going to earn a lot more money because you give him a leg, and then he'll pay in, let's say 10% of everything he earns more than he's earning today into the fund that will give more people legs, right? Something like that. So if the guy's earning, and if he earns below a certain threshold, then he doesn't pay anything, right? Well, indeed, if he earns below what he's earning today, he doesn't pay anything. That kind of a mechanism is a mechanism with your customers where the guy doesn't mind. I mean, whatever. If I increase my income, like, okay, whatever. As long as it's tenfold of what I'm making today, then okay, I don't mind giving you 10%, whatever. And I wouldn't mind doing that out of gratitude, but also I wouldn't mind doing that if you took care of me and if you made sure that leg thing still worked. That's cool. And then the added benefit, of course, is that more people would have this. So that kind of a securities type of model where the float or the continued revenue comes from the customer, that's great. But then the problem there is that it would feel kind of exploitative. It feels like, oh, wait a minute, you're like this American guy, exploiting the locals. So it's like, well, how do you make that so you see eye to eye to each other and it's not exploitative, but you end up helping that guy and you can help many more people with something, that isn't, because the problem about giving people stuff for free as well, then they don't treat it well. And then the thing doesn't last as long. Yeah. So there's all these incentives taking place when we do stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I know that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but let's talk about some of these big companies and what they're up to. Totally. Which company do you want to start with? Which part of the alphabet?
Eqwal. That is the worst name of any company I've ever heard. No, seriously, it looks like it's spelled wrong or something. It's Eqwal. I thought it was a joke. First when we were reading this, I was like, EQWAL, really? I don't know. It sounds like
what is it with the VC people or these big companies? Like,
pick a name out of a hat. I think, I don't know. Anyway, so tell me about this Eqwal thing, because I don't know what that is. It's what is that?
So Eqwal is a company that was, it's a very recent company, but one of the things that is interesting is they're making some of these big moves, not only into the digital space, but into the clinical space, and they're creating, some vertical integration. So they are in 10 different countries. They've got, 2,700 employees. They're all over the place. They have done a lot of acquisitions in the digital space. So they combined Vorum, TechMed, and Rodin, which was an interesting, collaboration or combination. And then they have actually brought that all under the name Quadra. So you're going to love that name as well. But so I think
how's it spelled? Is it
QW?
QW?
Of course. Yes.
Okay. QW. Quadra.
QWADRA, I believe, is the name of it.
Okay.
So
cool.
But what's interesting about that is they've got some really great workflows and things of that nature. So to me, like, as far as a big company looking at really hanging their hat on a digital workflow, for the purposes of this podcast, I would say I think they've got some good things going. And who knows, they may start looking at some manufacturing and such, but they've been laser focused on this digital workflow, taking the friction out of the design side of things, which you have always been a big fan of. So going from scan to your definitive device, whatever that looks like in the digital space in an easy way.
But these guys doing, so you mentioned a bunch of technologies and stuff, and I love this digital workflow. So I'm on the website now, like looking at this. They have 3D acquisition stuff, right? 3D rectification software, milling machines, robotics. It sounds very like up our kind of alley. But do they do patient care and devices? Is it kind of like that, or is it only doing devices? What are these always all about?
Right. So the Eqwal group, Quadra is like one of the companies under Eqwal. So
Yeah.
Eqwal does do patient care, and I think they've got like 200 and some clinics worldwide. So I mean,
Wow.
they're growing, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
and they're growing every day. They've made some very strategic um, things, and what's interesting is they're kind of growing through the people that were using that software.
Mhm.
So when you look at some of the contract manufacturers, they were like, okay, so it's a pretty easy thing. Who's using our software the most? Let's go get them. They would fit into our ecosystem or
Mhm.
what have you.
Okay.
And so I think that's
Okay.
an interesting way to go. And what they looked at too, I think, if I was, in that room, is okay. So, we don't only want to sell to ourselves, right? We
Mhm.
want to sell to everybody else. And
Mhm.
so finding a company that also sells to everybody else,
Mhm.
very specific niche things, I think
Mhm.
is an important, um, thing to take into consideration. And I think they've done a good job doing that.
Okay. Yeah. I like the idea that there's this quadra digital product, and they could really push this as being like the backbone of a lot of these clinics and stuff like this, and also to give themselves advantage, right? If this stuff works well, it's going to really power all their workflows. Let them do all their ordering in house and design and making in house, and yeah, that could be a sustainable advantage for them in the long run. I'm always a bit nervous when you do like the components and the service and the digital all together, But it's interesting that all these big guys seem to be doing that, right? I mean, there isn't like they all seem to have like the clinical stuff going for them as well. Is it just to make products? Is it better, or they actually it's like a revenue thing as well? Because in Ossur's case, it seemed like it was a real revenue component as well, and a lot of these other guys, it seems like it's a real revenue getter, custom acquisition kind of thing for them to have these clinics.
So I think that's a great insight. And I think the thing to remember that makes orthotics and prosthetics very unique is that, if the cost goes up on something, you can't just go out and raise the price and pass that savings along. You have a set price. So if you get $3,000 for a prosthesis and your cost of goods needs to be under $1,000 to keep your cost of goods under 30%,
Mm-hmm.
and the price of your cost of goods goes up 10%, that means you can't go and raise your prices 10%. You're still going to get the 3%. So for these big companies, when they're vertically integrating like that, they are taking control of their margins essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's smart. So that is the one dial they can turn to create a higher profit because they can't just go out and raise the price.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And they also have a thing called Actor, which has a Q in it, right? Wow. And which seems to be like their own orthotics brand, let's say. And I think, or insoles, and they also do like other braces and technical orthopedics and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar.
Okay, but that I like as well.
With
This
that side of
branded
things.
kind of bracing, because that for additive, we know that's going to be beautiful. That is a beautiful business case. All these custom braces and custom positions, custom orthoses, custom. That is like the real money earner, because that's something you can like almost automate. You can automate the software, put the machine on, boom.
Yeah.
Compared to then looking at a socket or stuff like that, there's a lot more manual labor involved, a lot more also just consultant consultation time. Depend on these kind of things. So I think that kind of like branded thing is really good. But yeah, this is interesting. This is an interesting play. And they bought something called Taska. What is a Taska? What is that?
Taska is a hand,
Yeah.
specific hand, and it's like a super durable, waterproof hand. It's also pretty fast. It's kind of the go-to gold standard for if you have the ability to pay or you have a payer that pays. That's the hand. The only downside to that hand it was massive and heavy, and so you can't put it onto like a kid or a woman or what have you, or you end up having this like Popeye looking hand. It's just not right. But they have created a very much a smaller version of that. So now, I mean, it's a really interesting play to me for the upper extremity market. And Europe is different as far as the insurance side of things for some of these these higher end things. So you can get paid and paid well for this. You're not limited, so to speak, on a specific code. And so, being a European company and then bringing this manufacturing in under the house, I mean, it's great. And I mean, it is wild. I mean, I'd love to know what happened. I mean, I wish I had more information, because it's just so odd that Fillauer had the distribution rights, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. But then it's like Eqwal almost do that, right? And they were just like, "Hey, we'll take that, and I would have to believe that there was an offer or something on the table for Taska, and I have no insider knowledge of any of that, but that just makes zero sense that Hanger would acquire Fillauer. Taska is distributed by Fillauer, and then Eqwal buys Taska. That is,
it could be a coincidence. It could be, an inconvenience for everyone. It could just be.
I don't believe in that with this industry, man. Unfortunately, I think it's okay. So I don't think it was a coincidence at all.
Another thing I do think is interesting. First of all, it's a myoelectric hand that's waterproof. This is the innovation. So does that mean the other ones, if I was in a rain, I would like, what would happen, dude? This is terrible.
Well, so a lot of times you have to really think about what are you doing with your hand, and that's one of the things with their stuff you don't have to think about.
Oh my God, I would be such a terrible prosthetics patient, dude. I burnt myself twice this week cooking.
I think you're just a bad patient in general. So. When you had your ankle thing, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness,
it was terrible, dude.
Okay.
I would short out my like $40,000 hand like twice a week or something. but then the interesting thing for me is this: when you said it was like the gold standard kind of robust, rugged hand, that just sounds to me like totally like something Ossur would want. You know what I mean? It totally sounds like the perfect Ossur thing to kind of put on their necklace of companies, right?
Well, you would think so. They invested early on into the B Bionic line, and so they've made that better and better and better. So I would say that'd be probably a competing product. They would
already had it kind of.
Yeah, so it's like it's not really worth it to put into the portfolio. And there's a lot of people that are B Bionic fans and that sort of thing, or I forget what the latest generation of that is. I don't really see either of the other companies, Ottobock or Ossur, really being interested in something like this. Ottobock, they've been in upper extremity forever. They already have some of the technology in there, and so to me so it would be a Hanger or an Eqwal purchase for sure. I don't see either one of the other companies being interested.
Yeah, and I like that. This is because Eqwal is actually also European. So it's a European group, right? It's a European kind of. It seems like it's like a gobbledy-gobble little Pac-Man kind of like company that's just like been set up specifically to do this, right? But it's been doing this since 1976. So they're French, and they've been doing this for a really, really long time. Just maybe a lot of people haven't noticed that they've been doing this for such a long time, But they seem to be like super acquisitive, but they're not mentioned as much. Like I didn't know they existed before today, for example. But I knew about Ossur and Ottobock, right? You know what I mean? So this is kind of like a bigger group, but maybe not as like maybe not as kind of in your face as the other companies, let's say.
I would say they're sneaky good as far as what they're trying to do, and they're definitely out of all the companies the most nimble.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and that's what they have going for them. So, I think that if they want to buy something, it's a very low friction to buy something. Right. Obviously you've got to do your due diligence and all that stuff, or do you? I don't know. And they just say, yes, I want that. And they go do it. And it happens really fast. And so I think that is one thing that they have going for them that is very good. So it's kind of like those companies that say fail fast too. So, in the same way, you think of like an Ottobock. I mean, they take forever to do anything, to innovate and that sort of thing. They want to make sure that it's done to perfection, all that before it's released. That's what they're known for. And there's a premium put on that. And there's no problem with any of that, but it's the exact opposite, right? So, and you have to have all those in there. But to be nimble in this field is really important.
Yeah, and we saw it in 3D printing. We saw this as well. We saw all these corporate venture funds come in. There were lots of money, big companies, right? And they kept missing deals because it would take too long. Because of course, it wouldn't be like their investment company would have to make an investment. It would be like some giant company would have to make an investment. So this lawyer had to look at it, had to go through the board, and then it would take a while, right? The board doesn't meet every day, and then they would miss out on so many of these investments just because they were just like, doing them things at their own pace. Of course, you don't want to mess up as like one of the world's biggest car companies or whatever, that kind of stuff. So it makes sense, but we would just see them miss out on deals again and again and again. So nimble, I think, especially if the opportunities arise. Mr. Smith built up his device business for 30 years. The kids don't want to run it. That's a really immediate concern for that family if he passes away, and then, being nimble is super, super, big deal then.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the interesting things on in any of these acquisitions is these are not startup acquisitions. Like these guys have some life under their belts. It's 5+ years in business. They're not going out and looking for the next unicorn that might burst to 10. Like it's just good, solid, relevant. It's going to match the portfolio. I think it's good for any of them. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a yeah. I think that's a good point to make as well. I think, and that also means that you have to be a little bit more. You care a little bit more about the employees, right? You can't just kick out everybody. You can't just you have to be more kind of growth oriented in the longer term as well.
Right.
As opposed to start off where everybody's like, okay, I'll get my money and whatever happens later, who cares, right?
Yeah.
If you've been working with people for 20 years, you've got all these people trained up to take over and stuff. You want more continuity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, that's super cool.
So we covered Eqwal in your favorite spelling, right? Then you've got Ossur. And we did a whole episode on Ossur, Embla, that sort of thing. And I think you had the same kind of critique of Embla, right? As far as the naming choice.
Well, now I think Embla's a wonderful name.
Oh, there you go. Comparatively speaking.
Yes, exactly.
So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, I actually it's probably one of the more downloaded episodes that we've done together. And there was so much more than going over an annual report. It was, hey, what are the actual trends in O&P? And I thought they did a great job putting that together. So if you want to know more about that, I would say find that episode. I think it was in this season that we did it. And so let's go over to Ottobock, since that is one of the ones that you know of. I mean, what are your thoughts on them as part of the big four?
So my okay, you're gonna have to run me through that list of the big four because I don't know who that.
Okay,
but that's
so
good.
we've got Ottobock, Ossur,
Embla,
Eqwal, Embla, sorry, Embla. Eqwal
and Hanger,
and Hanger.
Oh yes,
yep. So we've got Ottobock and Hanger to cover those two.
So Ottobock, to me, what I know of is it seems to be quite the Germans always say about this. I was like gründlich, it's like kind of like solid and kind of like well put together, right? It seems to be that they're a company that doesn't really kind of like operate maybe on the cutting edge, but then gets stuff done eventually, kind of like kind of that's the kind of impression I get. And they don't seem to be like you said. There's now like they don't seem to be like innovating at light speed, the speed of light, let's say. And where Ossur to me seems more aggressive. I don't know if that's true or not, and seems more kind of like focused on winning at the cutting edge. These guys are just like grinding out a win, kind of. You know what I mean? And that's just my feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the exact same thing. It's like not only grinding out a win, but they've any of these companies have what is called a war chest, right? If something happens, they've got cash to go into to keep the company running. And you definitely aren't going to want to bump up against Ottobock because they will win every day of the week. It's kind of like bumping up against Apple. It's a cash cow sort of thing. Definitely international, selling international, vertically integrated for a long time. Yes, I would say slower to innovate, but when the innovations come out, they just work. And I think that's really neat. So I think that's what I would say about Ottobock is they are the top that has is spinning, and they have this momentum going, and it's hard to steer, but it doesn't need to be nimble.
Okay. And then the other thing is, because of course I know this kind of stuff, they have like this IFAB thing, that's just like their kind of digital backbone thing, I guess. The same thing that Eqwal doing, right? And then they have like some kind of like 3D printed adjacent products, this TT thing. And I think they have a helmet, right?
Yeah. So I've heard great things about the helmet. The transtibial prosthesis has been in design for a long time. It's not going to fail. I think it's more on the expensive side. There's not a lot of like post-processing finishes. Like there's no like vapor polishing, the pretty side of it. It's literally a plain socket, but they've got the bones of it, right? So it's not going to fail. And or if it's going to take something super catastrophic to fail. I think one of the things that's been interesting about Ottobock on the digital side is they have been trying to focus on creating some kind of internal softwares that are more click type of things, like, hey, you want a transtibial socket, here's an easy way to modify, and then the rest of it's automation. I think that's pretty smart to do, especially as you're growing on an international scale. You can give that tool to your clinicians, and you've got something that's a known quantity. I would say on that same note, though, I think you run the risk when you're developing internally like that, the market's going to outrun you much quicker. So like, we had Dwan on for the 3MF stuff, and I learned so much there. But like, I guarantee you that 3MF, I would be surprised if they know what that is. So it's not like, now they may know one day, but it's not going to be part of their ecosystem right now. So you're talking about a lag in some technology, and even in the scanning side, making some of that stuff internally. That's cool, and it's good to have a closed solution. But man, what about some of these other scanners like the EinScan that's coming out, that has come out? That's a very affordable, great scanner. Can you talk to some of that stuff? The results are going to be great. And I don't know if you saw the latest thing. Creality is
I did. So
releasing that blue light scanner, dude.
Yeah, let's talk about that later. I want to talk about that as well. That's good, dude.
Okay, like later in another episode, or like later today.
Either one will do, man. Because I want to talk. I want to hear your opinion on that, because you're an EinScan fan. So I thought that was kind of amazing.
Well, so I'm a good scanner fan, right? And affordable. Okay, so when I say affordable, under $10,000. So, but yes, let's finish up. So, I mean, that's where I'm at on Ottobock. I think there's positive and negative, and I think it's good to have your internal kind of workflow. But one thing I did notice, and I can't get back to it, I can't find it. It does seem like they have a little innovation hub. So maybe their little renegade team, right, that evaluates all these technologies and maybe has a small group of people. I think that's really good to have, and then release the technology as it looks to be mature or working within your portfolio.
Yeah. What I like, so Ottobock to me feels slow, but okay. So what I like about them, I really like this micro thing. This is their head, their baby deformed head helmet thingy-majiggy, right? Yep. So I look at this thing, and I like a lot of things about this thing that I don't like about some of the other things on offer on the market. So first off, okay. I agree that you need to make a choice as a company like that to say like, hey, are we open playground for everyone, or do we have our backbone and we only do our only technology, right? And that's going to limit you as to who can connect with you and who can make stuff. But what I really like about the kid helmet that I think is the best of kind of a big company developing stuff is, first off, yes, it works with their kind of like scanning type of thing, which may be limiting, but it's using the 3D printing for the customization and the lightweight fit, but they have a closure system as well, which means that if your kid's head grows, then you can adjust it really easily and you don't have to come back and order new ones, right? Which I think is a real value. And what I love about this thing is it's got a liner, right? Like on the inside of it that makes it soft. And I think that's much softer than some of the just only MJF printed alternatives. And also that liner is removable, right? So you can wash it. They give you one, so you wash it. And babies have a way of like just getting like stuff everywhere and all this. So that's a real life kind of thing where you're on one hand saying, let's make it more comfortable for the kid with an extra thing, this liner. And also let's make that, that kid's going to be all over the place, crawling with his head on the floor or whatever. Yeah, let's make it so you wash the liner. That sounds like a really useful thing. You know what I mean? So that to me is an idea of like, yeah, we can need innovation. Maybe they're slower, but they might end up having a product that's actually like a really good fit for the actual consumer or the actual user. So that to me is like, that's the good and the bad of being that like such a big company, that you do it slower maybe, but maybe you end up with a better product or a more comfortable product for your customer,
It's interesting that you chose that product.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know nothing about them. And I looked at this course because I looked at all these helmets, because that's the one of the biggest things for 3D printing at the moment is the helmet thing.
Yeah. Well, so that is the one product in their whole portfolio that they're getting sued over.
What? Really?
Yeah. So this is interesting, and this is probably a discussion for another day. But they are getting sued, which to me means that they're onto something, right? If or the other company is not. So Cranial Technologies, which is a large national company, think of it like a Starbucks for helmets.
Okay.
Is suing Ottobock, and I don't see that this lawsuit is closed, so it's still open apparently. But this started in April of last year. And it says that they're violating or in violation, or what is it, infringing on a patent from Cranial Technologies. So it's really going to be interesting to see where that goes, because I'm sure Ottobock has their own IP around this thing. And then this is going to be settled out of court. The lawyers are going to make money, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But, Cranial Tech must think they've got something, or they can settle, and that's a great, other revenue source. But when you're poking the bear, this is probably one I wouldn't want to poke, unless there was some sort of massive upside. But I'm like looking at this patent, and I'm like, this is the reason why I hate this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I understand, like you need intellectual property and all this stuff, but like. Okay, so this goes on for years and years and years, and now all these kids that have deformed heads and such don't have access to life-changing therapy through some of this stuff. Like that kind of stuff drives me crazy. So anyway, good job picking the only product on their portfolio that they're getting sued.
Maybe, but yeah, I think this, the lawsuit thing, I think we can discuss in a separate episode. Well, yeah, that's the most broadest patents are the ones that are the most valuable in a certain extent. That doesn't actually necessarily mean you're innovating. It means you'll be able to obtain that patent, and that you've got a good attorney to do that for you. So, and I agree with you. I think it does retard innovation in certain things. And a lot of things, like these guys might think that they'll try to sue them because they think a settlement is in the offering, or they think they may, or they think they'll get 100 different competitors, to do this additively or do this in a customized way. So at one point we see a lot of patents like this in 3D printing as well, like the digital manipulation of files to make a custom thing or something like that. And then manage to get a patent at it for like footwear or helmets or whatever. So, I think that kind of stuff is kind of it's a bit of a downer for me, I think, as well.
Yeah. And, these are the kinds of things that I don't believe Ottobock would roll over on. Right. So like, it's going to be one of those things of whose pockets are deeper, and I know whose pockets are deeper. But this is, I know this is corporate stuff. So, but it still drives me crazy. So we got one more company left, Hanger. Prosthetics and Orthotics. Well, what do you know about them?
Well, they're like kind of like, well, they're trying to do the Starbucks of this thing, right? So this is the most logical strategy, I think. You've got all these mom and pop shops. They're going to stop at one point. There's no natural company to buy them or come to sell them to, right? So what you do is you hoover them all up, right? You hoover them all up. You buy them. You give the founders an exit. You keep the employees. Hopefully, you train up a whole bunch of new people, and then you kind of industrialize it, and then you start making more and more of the components yourself, and make it more profitable. Yeah, it's super straightforward. I think the hanger model is super straightforward. It could be really, for these other guys, it's like, it seems like the hanger is really focused on this retail part of it. And if they can really, be a counterweight to insurers, really kind of like make the running of the shop really efficient and really place these things well and have these network effects and stuff, then I think really they could really kind of do a lot of like become really big, and especially if they would do really good deals with HMOs or other kind of insurers, other kind of healthcare providers, right? If they become the sole source of all amputees from X health system go to their clinics, they can do that, right?
Yeah.
Some local guy, I'm there with my 3 people, I can't do that,
Yeah.
So there's these real economies of scale they can really benefit from. And they really seem like they're kind of the kingmaker out of all these guys, right? The other guys are kind of like doing exactly kind of this mixed kind of thing, but they're really retail heavy, and they're so big in retail that they could really make any one of these other companies much, much bigger than the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If two of the other 4 merged, yeah, sure, they'd be bigger, right? But if Hanger merged with any one of the other 3, it would have like kind of a lock on the market and on the device business. Meanwhile, it doesn't have to pay top dollar for the cutting edge things. It's gonna, build a nice, beautiful factory in Mexico to automate the hell out of like making these things close to the customer and really in an efficient way. Using not only Mexican like cheap labor, like we said this last time. No, using Mexican inventors, engineers, and software developer and people that are cheaper than the people in the States, but still really, really high level. So that to me, it seems like a lock. The strategy is just like, locked in already, homing in on the target. You know what I mean? And apart from them doing it operationally, kind of being bad and getting investors to like not lose faith in them, I don't see how they can fail. Essentially, if they could just like, it's just the money. It's like it's Starbucks for orthotics and prosthetics, right?
Yeah.
And we do more stuff ourselves. We make more profit all the time. We do more CFAB stuff all the time. Move everything to Mexico. It's beautiful. I don't know what it does for prosthetic care. I like the idea of these independent people offering, personalized care, being their own business, but this is like, the logic to this is really kind of very ever present,
I think one of the best things that Hanger ever did was go back to being private or privately held, right, off the stock market, so they don't have to have these, quarterly calls and earnings calls. And I remember back in the day when I was a resident, it was like, okay, so where are we going to go? Like really on the money side of things. Hey, do you think you're going to be able to deliver this prosthesis out the door? Well, we might be able to, we might not. That's probably still happens. I mean, it still happens in small companies, but you're right. The economies of scale, now you can spread that over a larger, and you just focus on taking really good care. The other thing that I love about what Hanger's doing is a couple things, right? So they've got the clinic side. They have SPS, which is distribution of multiple products. So not only do you have a clinic, but then you have a distribution that takes care of all the distribution, right, of every single product that you don't have in your portfolio. And then they have some off-the-shelf products and white label products as well. The thing that I like about that is, like and dislike, is that you now have, if Hanger Prosthetics comes to XYZ company in, some small town in Kansas that has a really cool product, and they say, hey, we have 900 clinics and we're interested in buying your product and distributing it through SPS. Will you give us a discount? you're going to say yes, but then you give the discount, right? And so it's like you have this economies of scale where you could literally go in and buy the product because you have 900 clinics to buy for at a significantly discounted rate, which is great for Hanger, potentially great for that vendor, but you have all the leverage there because you've got the cash. So, they don't have to have the product in their portfolio if they distribute it, right? Because they can resell it. They can buy it at a discount and resell it and still make money. They don't care if they don't own the. So I love that aspect of it. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think the other thing that you said is you can be a national company, part of national contracts for insurance companies and that sort of thing. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think even bigger than that, they have started this thing called Hanger Ventures. And Hanger Ventures is interesting. So it's like their own little VC company that looks for small companies that are innovating, and they look to inject cash into these companies to bring products to life. I don't know how it works, but I like the idea of it. And so, I just think that's interesting. So I think you're right on the money as far as I think one of the best things that has happened is they've gone private. I think the other thing that's been great is they're now really focused on patient care. I have a lot of friends that are in the Hanger Clinic market, and they're happy as employees. I think they're good to their employees. They're innovating. They're doing some cool things. They have, according to some of my friends that are vendors, one of the best shows, not only clinically relevant shows, but it's just for them. It's a private show because they've got 900 clinics. And so they have the vendors to themselves. They have all this expertise that's within the company. I think that's really cool. So I think they've got a lot going. I think the one thing that's probably frustrating on their side of things is that there is opportunity and they probably have cash to spend. But I think just kind of like what you were saying is that if you're not nimble, you're going to lose out on some deals to some of these other companies. And so I think probably one of the things that they're going to want to work on is trying to identify early, be nimble, and make quick decisions because these other companies are going to be making quick decisions.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I think, and that is like, managing those 900 clinics, it's almost like a really different business than, just this acquisition company that just goes around and buys new technologies and new sites. It's almost like you have to be very kind of like split between that nibble go company that will take risks and that will go, and the other one that just has to, imagine just the what it would cost them, to one device failure or a problem with the patient or something like this. That really careful business that has to maintain all these clinics and all these patient interactions. So it's almost two different companies. And and managing that, I think, is going to be the challenge for everyone. And then if you're more device focused, you also have to be innovative, right? So you got to do like 2-3 completely different things. And we see that as being very different. One is like kind of like a Marriott type business, right? Where day in, day out, you perform, day in, day out, you make sure the burger is the same burger, right? There's no innovation in the Marriott burger. Nobody gets paid to innovate the Marriott burger. But you go to like South Africa or New Zealand or Tokyo, the Marriott burger is the same, right? And that's what they want. And you order on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's the same weight, same amount of cheese, everything. And then that's very different than a business where you're supposed to find out how people walk, using something inspired by sponges and storks, whatever. And that is very different from a business where you're like, you're on the financial cutting edge. You're trying to like take over the market in Phoenix, right? In the best way possible. Do you buy these 10 clinics or do you buy these 10 clinics, but then you do buy them in Anaheim, right? What's the better? That kind of like a really harsh kind of financial business. It almost seems like it's 3 different businesses,
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so
that was a long episode, man. Do you want to cover the Creality thing, or is that for another day?
I think it's for another day. I want to look at this tooling thing because I think it's a really big thing, and I think because long time these iron scan thing was the only game in town, kind of. And so we should talk about scanning. I think in the scanning market another time. I think that would be a good thing.
Okay. Well, I think the only thing that's close, I would say, to this, and I apologize to the listeners. I may even cut this out. Who knows? We're just gonna go with it. But to have an affordable blue light scanner, so the blue light is cool because it can be used on reflective surfaces without targets.
Okay.
And I mean, at $1,200, I mean, the cheapest one I believe is the it's from Scan as well, but I think it's still around 20,000, something like that. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing scanner, but at a $1,200 price point, I mean, you got to be kidding me. So, I mean, I'm super curious on that.
Yeah, me too. I think for a long time, everybody tried to do low cost scanners. To give you an idea, I always tell the same story, but I do this like report on scanning and 3D printing. And basically, for 3D printing, you have to every year, new printers or some new market entrants and stuff like that. And for scanning, it's like this company went bankrupt, this company went bankrupt, this didn't work. It's a bloodbath, the scanning market, right? So for a long time, the only people that were able to put out a cost-effective scanner and succeed for a long time were these iron scan people. And there've been some people historically as well that had some pretty good runs there, but they made a really good run of it. And everybody thought this was kind of the game in town, And then Creality comes in. There's a company that makes $200 printers, like millions of them, by the way. And they have as a goal to really populate the ecosystem, to drive parts to 3D printing, to develop the 3D printing market. So acquiring geometry is for them something that'll power printers and power their printer sales. So this is like a business development thing for them. Beautiful. And this is actually quite a formidable company. They're known, like they made quite low cost, quite terrible printers, to be honest. But they value engineer these things, made it a lot better. And it's incredible what they're capable of. So putting them against Shining, I think, will really be really, really amazing for the consumer and professional users, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and I know this is a thing for another day too, but I mean, it also is difficult to compete with a company that has backing of a large company, a large government like theirs, right? So it's almost like it's the ultimate cheat code, I would say.
Yeah, it's a different thing, of course. Like, yeah, but in given areas that are strategic, the Chinese will have a big advantage.
Yeah,
and that's going to make it very difficult for like a Belgian company or something. They will not have access to the real same resources because this is super on point in China's kind of up market push, their technological push, their kind of their push into more precision manufacturing, push into 3D printing. It's a perfect nexus of something that that a lot of government people in China and a lot of like banks and investors around there would love to support. So, yeah, I agree. I think that it's going to be very difficult for someone else to outcompete them on scale, scope, and the functionality of this thing.
Yeah. Well, in closing, let's put a bow around all of this. Okay, so we talked about the E's, right? Eqwal, Embla, Hanger, and Autobox. So the big four, so to speak. Hey, if we missed one, let us know. But I'm trying to think, like I'm racking my brain. I can't think of anybody else that's at that level. And then coming to a close with the next episode that's going to drop. What would you say some takeaways that have been a surprise for you, say over the last 3 to 4 months that you've learned about our industry, pleasant or unpleasant, I guess you could say. But I mean, we really try to be positive because there's so many things that are positively going on in the field, and there's not really a reason to be negative in general, right? When you're talking about some of this stuff. So what has really struck you? And then I'll say some of the stuff that struck me, just learning, and I think that's what's been wild about this podcast is, with almost 96 episodes under our belt, like the genuine curiosity that you have for the field has definitely rubbed off on me, because I was kind of had my blinders on. I've been in the field for a long time. I have some preconceived notions, and you've helped me shed some of that. So I think that's great. So any thoughts there?
Still, first off, how amazing the business case is for 3D printing. how quickly you guys actually buy printers. It doesn't maybe look like this for how quickly people can make the shift to exploring, buying first printer, then boom, I have an MGS system. That's much faster, I think, than a lot of other businesses. Just how fragmented this market is, and how kind of it really is we're on the cusp of something, like as in for the digital stuff, but also for this disruption by these large players. It really feels like you're at this pivotal moment. You know what I mean? It's not like we're talking about, well, car industry, with the electrification is a big deal as well, but it feels kind of like that sea change, between these mom and pop stores and these giant integrated vertical line firms. And just how many patients have invented something. This is crazy. I mean, does this happen in other businesses? Are there a lot of heart patients out there making stents? You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's that we've interviewed like a bunch of them already, and just how good those inventions are, and how big invention is as a part of like your daily practice. That still continues to amaze me. It's your daily practice, like you're improvising, innovating, inventing, and how important that is to this industry to keep coming up with new products.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's been neat. I love the thing about the patients inventing and the empathy for clinicians. I think that people don't talk about that enough. Like, people rely on clinicians to walk, and this is not a 9-to-5 job, and you have to know that. But then, yeah, absolutely, this adoption seems to be snowballing into the additive manufacturing side. It's like, the bamboo lab printer now is the gateway drug to the much bigger stuff. And so I think that is very neat. And I would say, in closing for this, and I just did actually did a kind of webinar on the dollars and cents of 3D printing specifically for orthotics and prosthetics. And I'd love to go through that sometime with you. It was just kind of a fun exercise of where the opportunities truly are for orthotics and prosthetics. And, one of the things that I learned, so I did this webinar, I took foot orthoses, SMOs, AFOs, and prostheses, and does it make sense to 3D print those? And, all the powder bed fusion players are pushing hey, you should be doing foot orthoses in powder bed fusion. When you actually look at the numbers of the cost to do powder bed fusion foot orthoses, it makes 0 sense to do powder bed fusion foot orthoses, unless you're saying, hey, let's do less waste. Where it does make sense is FDM. I think FDM for foot orthoses is brilliant. Not only are you using less waste and all that stuff, you're turning these things pretty quick. The cost of goods is good, is makes a ton of sense. It beats traditional fabrication. You don't have to wait on a technician to build these things. There's so many good things. So, but powder bed fusion shined in other sides of things with the AFOs, SMOs, and that sort of thing. So it was just interesting to me when you're just talking numbers, not anything else. The foot orthotic market really benefits from FDM.
I totally agree with that. I think there's a lot more in there as well, actually, that I think that FDM could actually be better. The exception, I think, would be if we get cheaper TPU, and if you're doing it at a certain scale, because at a certain scale, batch to batch, powder bed fusion becomes beautiful again. But you're still looking at the high acquisition cost of the machine, and generally, I super agree with you. I think it's limited, and it's also a reason why a lot of these foot orthoses companies that use powder bed fusion have failed. Right? It's just these devices end up being way too expensive. And FDM can make them for a fraction of the cost, a third to a tenth of the cost, depending on how you cost them. So, I agree that definitely try FDM as a technology, and if to try and see if you get it to work before you try powder bed fusion, because powder bed fusion to me is much better at like mechanical devices, complex assemblies, larger devices, custom made kind of bracing, custom made kind of things to fit your body. That's where it really shines, and especially if you need 10,000 of something, a day or something like that, then it's absolutely beautiful technology.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. Let's shut it down.
All right, man. So I really enjoyed this. I thought this was fun. I hope everyone enjoys this. This is this episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, and a special thanks to LimbGuard and Advanced 3D for sponsoring this episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners. Have a great day.